Alright, let's get this over with. Hey guys, Caleb here from CDBS Studios, and Illumination is a studio that I don't think needs much of an introduction. They're pretty much hands down the worst mainstream animated studio right now, as pretty much most of their filmography is complete garbage. Like, unlike other studios that I've already done videos for, things like Pixar, DreamWorks, and even Disney have their fair share of stinkers, but they also have some really solid positives to balance out those negatives. Illumination doesn't have that. The best film on this list is only like an 8 out of 10 film. Like, it's nothing groundbreaking. It's like probably would be a C tier DreamWorks or Disney film if we were talking legit. And it just gets worse from there. So I figured with the release of the Super Mario Galaxy movie, now would be the perfect time just to make a video on ranking this studio's output, just so that I don't have to do this ever again, except for like if the channel lasts another 10 years or something, maybe we can circle back around to making another ranking on Illumination. So yeah, we're going to be ranking the Illumination filmography today, and I'm doing it now because no, I will not be watching Minions 3 when it comes out unless someone really drags me to the theater and forces me to watch it and make a review on it. The only chance you're ever going to have to hear me talk about Minions 3 when it comes out is going to be if I see it eventually, like someone forcing me to see it on a streaming service or something, then I'll maybe put it in the 2026 film ranking at the end of this, at the beginning of next year. Or again, if the channel lasts 10 years and I have to rank like 15 Minions movies, then fine, I'll watch it. But I'm not watching and waiting to watch it to put it in this video. Do not leave me any comments. Other than that, though, we're dealing with 16 films that pretty much are almost all bad. Like, I'm not even gonna lie, this ranking is so lopsided that there's gonna be a lot of negativity. So, without further ado, let's just jump into this thing and let's just get this over with and rank the current filmography of Illumination Entertainment. Oh man, why am I doing this? You know, it really is kind of shocking that when I'm dealing with 16 films, most of which are terrible, that the last place spot still manages to win in a landslide. Hop is gotta be one of the worst films I've ever seen in my entire life. Like, honestly, I consider just leaving this thing off the list entirely, pretending it didn't exist like I've tried to do for so many years. Maybe just making this list a ranking of the animated films. That way I could honestly say that this film doesn't count. Because, yes, this movie is terrible. So you're probably wondering what happens in this movie. Well, this is an Easter movie, and the film centers on a main character named EB, whose dad is the Easter Bunny. And EB's dad really wants EB to take over the business and become the next Easter Bunny, except he doesn't want to be the Easter Bunny and he wants to be a drummer. So EB decides to run away from Easter Island and go to Hollywood, where he runs into James Marsden, and pretty much the pacing runs right into a wall after that, because pretty much the rest of the film is James Marsden and EB just on random vignette adventures that are really just meant to make the 5-year-olds laugh. Like, there's a scene where James Marsden in this film is looking after his sister's boss's mansion, and when EB first shows up, he wrecks the place, but this has no tension because we never see the boss, so there's no tension in that side of the story. And then we see that James Marsden tries to try out for a job, but EB is embarrassing him, so he has to hide the talking bunny from everybody. And then later they go to a beauty talent show pageant where James Marsden's little sister is performing, but EB makes some snide remarks, and James Marsden then needs to pretend that EB is a ventriloquist just so that they can not reveal he's a talking bunny to the world. Okay, that makes sense. I mean, I'd probably be freaked out at first if a bunny was talking to me. I can understand this film's rules. And then all of a sudden they go to this random diner and EB's literally sitting in the booth talking to the waiters to order, and they don't care at all. And then he also goes to audition for David Hasselhoff's talent show to become famous, and David Hasselhoff doesn't care that he's a talking rabbit. Well, so what was the point of hiding him in the other plots? Like, what's the point if nobody cares? What, huh? Anyway, on the other side of the story, we also have what's going on Easter Island, in which we see that EB's dad is really sad about his son leaving him, and to try to cheer him up, his EB's dad's sidekick, Carlos, tries to cheer him up and also tries to imply that after years of loyal service, he deserves to take over the Easter business. But EB's dad says no, because only bunnies can be the Easter bunny. But literally, Carlos is kind of right. Like, EB doesn't want to be the Easter bunny at all, and Carlos does and is qualified for it. And honestly, like, then Carlos just has a very reasonable crash out in the third act where he decides to take over by force, and it literally feels warranted because, like, what did he do wrong for the entire film? He does deserve the position. Like, Illumination created a villain that is right. Like, what are you talking about? And then the movie realizes, though, in the last 10 minutes, it's like, oh, wait a minute, we need a reason for the 5-year-olds we made this film for to hate Carlos. So instead, he's going to try to kill James Marsden, who EB's dad accidentally kidnapped, but, which I guess, yeah, okay, that was kind of, that was not great. I mean, I don't know why James Marsden did anything wrong. But then also, Carlos decides to change all the Easter candy with bird food. Like, where was the scene in the film that said he hated candy? Like, did we forget where that was? Oh, I'm sorry. No, Illumination just realized we needed a reason for the 5-year-olds to hate the villains, so we have to throw this in at the last minute. And then the thing that makes this movie so questionable is then at the very end, because the whole premise of this first of the Hollywood star is that James Marsden's family wants him to get a job, but then at the very end, after being so impressed by his bravery and after no hesitation after EB requests it, James Marsden is elected to be the Easter Bunny by EB's dad, and EB also decides to be a co-Easter Bunny with him. Wait a minute, why does EB want to be the Easter Bunny again now? Like, did I miss something? And also, wait a second, why is James Marsden allowed to be the Easter Bunny? Because didn't the dad say that only bunnies could be the Easter Bunny? Oh, I'm sorry. No, Carlos is the villain of the movie, so he can't be the Easter Bunny, but the hero, aka James Marsden, can. What? Literally, like, the only positive thing I can say about this whole film is that it technically was the first installment in the subgenre where James Marsden gets in a car with a CGI creature, which is kind of interesting to see at least. But man, this movie is just so bad. I mean, like, none of the scenes at all flow together, and it's just random vignettes with James Marsden and EB, and then all of a sudden we have on the Easter Island, we have a villain who is right, who then gets completely badly written in the last 10 minutes, so the 5-year-olds this film was made for could finally have a reason to root against him. Literally never watch this movie. Like, it is so bad, and I really hope that people don't actually watch this every Easter, because, like, why are you watching this every Easter? Why are you giving Illumination constant money about this film? It's so bad. Like, I don't understand this movie at all, and I could go on a whole rant about why this movie's bad, which I've already done for the last, like, almost 6.5 minutes. So, you know what? I think that's enough talking about Hop, and we already got so many other bad movies to get through. So let's just move on. I think I've said enough about why this movie's bad and more than justified its last place spot. The Secret Life of Pets 2. Oh boy, I love this franchise, and this sequel is one of the greatest sequels I've ever seen in my entire life. I'll give this movie this. It doesn't just copy Toy Story like the first movie did. It also isn't that good. Basically, this movie to me just feels like they made it as a direct-to-DVD sequel where it's 3 different plot lines that have no business with each other, and then all of the sudden, somewhere down the pipeline, like near when they got to the end of making this film, they realized, wait a minute, we could put this in theaters and make more money. So let's haphazardly stitch our 3 stories together in the last 10 to 15 minutes in order to justify it going into the theaters so that people don't get bored. Oh man, so let's go through this movie. There's basically 3 subplots in this thing, and it's never really clear what any of which one is supposed to be the A plot until you get to the ending. So we'll just kind of go in the order, I guess, of least important to most important. So basically, there's a subplot where the main dog from the previous film goes to a farm and leaves his prized bee toy to this other dog played by Jenny Slate, who has a crush on the main dog. So she tries to look after the bee toy, but then she loses it in this apartment, this old lady's apartment who has a bunch of cats. So she needs to pretend to be a cat in order to get the toy back, and then she just becomes the queen of the cats. Like, all right. Then the other plot is we have the main dogs from the previous movies who have an interesting subplot where their owner falls in love with a guy and ends up having a child, and we get to see the dogs try to kind of look after the child. Well, only one of them, because the big brown dog has no business in the story whatsoever. He's basically just there because he's part of the franchise, and the main dog is the only one who has any relevance in the plot, as he tries to as he's worried for the new child, but then he goes to the said farm I mentioned earlier, and he talks to Harrison Ford, who tells him to be brave, and then all of a sudden the dog is brave, and that leads into what I think is supposed to be the A plot, where the Kevin Hart rabbit from the previous movie wants to be a superhero, so he goes to try to save this vicious tiger that is employed by this circus guy, and the tiger doesn't talk at all for some random reason, even though every other animal besides that one parrot can talk, so I don't know why. I don't know why they did that. I guess it was too hard to write dialogue for it or something. Anyway, then eventually all the subplots converge where the two main character dogs team up with Kevin Hart to get the tiger out, and then at the very end, when it looks like they're going to lose, the main villain gets driven over by the grandma that owned the apartment from the other Jenny Slate cat plot line. I don't understand what this movie's all about. Like, every single one of those plot lines is so uninteresting, and then the movie tries to bring them all together, and like, how on earth does infiltrating a cat society and becoming the queen of it collide with this story about trying to rescue this enslaved tiger? Like, what? Like, literally, it just literally feels like they wrote this as a direct-to-DVD sequel with 3 different stories, and then at the end they were like, we had to find a way to stitch them all together to justify this movie being in the theaters. So literally, this movie is bad. Like, I have no good things to say about this, but I can at least say that at least has some. It doesn't have like actually things I hate like I do with Hop. So I guess it gets to rank above Hop. But like, at the same vein, don't watch this movie either. Like, it's not good. Like, oh my god, why did I think this video was a good idea? Minions. My old arch nemesis finally returns. At least there's good stuff to say about it, so it doesn't rank last place. What a shame. Anyway, this movie is really weird to talk about because it's supposed to be a prequel to Despicable Me, talking about showcasing the origins of the Minions, which is, I've never liked the Minions past the first Despicable Me, so that should tell you a lot. The main problem with this entire concept as the film is that the Minions are characters that are classified in our film lingo as spice characters, where they only work if you sprinkle them into someone else's story, because like, I've seen it best described as, you wouldn't want a spoonful of cinnamon. This is literally like an entire downpour wave of cinnamon, because like, the Minions don't even speak in a language we can understand, so it's like, how am I supposed to be emotionally invested in their journey? Anyway, the main premise of this thing is that after spending years killing all of their bosses throughout history, Kevin, Stuart, and Bob decide to go off to find a new boss, and they end up trekking to this villain convention with this family, which they were pretty interesting. I kind of wish that we spent more time with them, and because they're the best part of the film, to be honest. And then they get hired by Scarlet Overkill, who's apparently the #1 villain in the world, and they get hired to steal the queen's crown so that Scarlet can become queen. But then Bob accidentally pulls Excalibur, which causes him to become king, which means that she doesn't like them anymore for some reason. So she tries to execute them, but it doesn't work. And then they team up to stop her. And then the movie realizes in the last 5 minutes it was supposed to be a Despicable Me origin. So Gru randomly shows up to justify why the Minions start working for him. Okay. The only real positive things I can say about this film is that I did like the villain family. I thought they were interesting. And I do actually think the first like 10 minutes where we see them killing all their bosses was kind of funny. And also think it's pretty funny how they specifically put them in a cave during World War II because you absolutely know who their boss would have been if they were around for that. So that's honestly kind of funny. But other than that, this movie is just an empty void where comedy and entertainment goes to die. Like, I don't know why this movie made $1 billion or why this was even an idea Illumination thought would work, because it doesn't. It's bad, but like literally, what are we doing? But again, I at least can say there's a couple things that made me laugh, and there's some good elements, which is why this movie doesn't get to be last like I so badly want it to be. Yeah, let's. I think that's enough about this movie. Let's move on. I've never seen an animated franchise that is more creatively bankrupt than The Secret Life of Pets. So let me just recap what happens in this first movie for you. So we venture into a world of creatures that that do things and have their own lives when their owners aren't around, and they also solace in the fact that they get attention and love from said owners. But then all of a sudden, the owner of the main character brings home a new creature who starts taking all of the love away from the main character, and then the two of them get lost together, and then they end up bonding and they end up liking each other. Why, yes, I have seen Toy Story. Why do you ask? Oh wait, no, this was supposed to be a segment on The Secret Life of Pets. Yeah, it's literally just the plot of Toy Story. Like I don't know why anyone bought this. Like, what are we doing here? And then there's a subplot in this movie where after the main dogs go missing, the Jenny Slate dog, who previously stated has a crush on the main character, tries to find the main character, and she enlists the help of this hawk, who then tells her who then finds this cat who tells her where the dog is. So then she enlists the help of the other animals that are just randomly part of this apartment building they all live in to go find the dog. Why, yes, movie, I have seen Toy Story 2. Why do you ask? Literally, yes, this movie is just if you took the plot of Toy Story 1 and the Buzz saving Woody plotline from Toy Story 2 and merged them into one movie. Like, that's literally what this thing is. The only things I can say that were kind of interesting was Kevin Hart's character as this kind of crazy bunny who formed this underground society of discarded pets is an interesting concept, but it never really goes anywhere. And other than that, this movie is literally just bad. Like, I don't know what to say. Like, honestly, don't watch this. Just rewatch Toy Story and Toy Story 2 and then just imagine their pets and you pretty much have this movie. Like I don't understand how anybody bought this movie or anything. Like, it's just so, like, it's just shamelessly ripping off two of the best animated movies ever created. It's like, what are we doing here, Illumination? Like, oh man. But again, there is some stuff I can say that I like. There's a couple good jokes here and there. I mentioned I like Kevin Hart's character in this film, not in the sequel, but in this one. And also there is some elements of quality, but other than that, like, this is just bad. Like, we're still in like probably like 2 out of 10 territory. Like, oh man. And now we come to the first of the two Illumination Dr. Seuss collaborations. The first of which being The Grinch, because The Grinch is not that good, as you can probably surmise by how low we still are in the ranking. Look, this film is, I guess, a little bit better than the previous four, but it's still not that great. Of course, we all know the story of the Grinch and the whole premise of, him stealing Christmas and that, but overall, like, this movie just falls into the classic problem that all Dr. Seuss adaptations tend to do, where because of how short the actual book is, we have to stretch it out into like an hour and 30-minute film, and it just doesn't work for a story like The Grinch because there's so many subplots we end up just spending time running into the wall with. As we first have a subplot about Cindy Lou Who trying to capture Santa Claus on Christmas Eve so that she can personally ask him for the gift she wants, which is a gift to help her mom, which, all right, that's kind of sweet. I'll allow that. And then there's this other side plot where the Grinch is basically trying to prepare to do his heist, and he ends up kidnapping this reindeer. But then eventually when they're practicing, the reindeer's family showed up, And because the backstory in this version is that the Grinch never had a family on Christmas, he decides to let the reindeer go to be with its family. But like, that does that not just completely ruin the point of the story? Because like, the whole premise is that at the end, when he gives Christmas back to the Who's, it's supposed to be the first real kind act he ever does, which is supposed to be the point of the story. But when he does this nice thing here in the middle, does that not completely ruin the ending? Like, am I going crazy or something? Like, I'm watching this movie, so clearly, yes, I am. But and then after that, we eventually finally get to the Grinch stealing Christmas, which is a pretty fun sequence. I do like how they invented all this new gadgetry that he has for the heist, which I think is pretty interesting. Also, I didn't mention it earlier, but I'll just say the animation's pretty. Like, they did a really good job at Whoville and just the surrounding areas in this world. They look pretty phenomenal, I'll admit, Illumination. But other than that, like, it's the story of the Grinch, but just padded out so much. Like, genuinely, like, this I will say I like this better than the Jim Carrey one, but like, if you want to watch a film adaptation of The Grinch, just watch the 80s animated shorts. Like, it's just an infinitely better way to experience this thing. And without further ado, we're done with The Grinch. Like, I have nothing else to say. So, you know what? Let's go ahead and move on again. Despicable Me 4. Oh man, what epic plotline are Gru, Lucy, and the girls gonna go on in the new installment of the Despicable Me franchise? They get put in witness protection because a villain wants to find and kill them. So the easiest way is to put them in witness protection while the rest of the anti-villain league deals with them. Wouldn't it make more sense if they just went after him themselves? Like, they already wants to kill them, so like, why are they hiding? It basically just leads to the classic Despicable Me slapstick humor, where we're gonna have lots of random slapstick about the Despicable Me family trying to fit in with their new lives and not really getting it, which is like, all right, I guess. There are some interesting plot lines. Like, there's this cool subplot where this girl wants to be a villain, so she enlists Gru to kind of teach her villainy, which is definitely not similar to something they do in the third movie. So, but she's a fun character and she's all right. And there's also then this subplot where Gru and Lucy now have a baby, and the baby doesn't like Gru for some reason, and it even goes to the point where the villain literally tries to turn the baby against Gru, but Gru's able to win it back. Also, can I just say, so Gru and Lucy have a baby now, but all of the girls look exactly the same age as in the original? Like, I get maybe you could make up the excuse that Margot didn't age, but like, Agnes, Edith, really? Like, come on, I feel like it's about time we can age them up. Oh, sorry, no, this is the franchise for 5-year-olds. We can't age up the little kids that the 5-year-olds are supposed to relate to. My bad. Anyways, there's also a side plot involving the minions, where while the minions are in, while Gru and the family are in witness protection, the minions stay at the Anti-Villain League headquarters, and they end up becoming the Fantastic Four for some random reason. But this doesn't factor into anything going on. They're only part of like 30 seconds of the final battle, so I don't know why we wasted all our time on that. The only things that I can also positively say is that the ending sequence where Gru and Will Ferrell sing a version of Rule the World in the Anti-Villain League prison, and we get a cameo of all the different villains from the previous movies, including Vector, was pretty cool, and it was the only thing in the movie that really got me happy. Also, I find it hilarious that Will Ferrell decided to be the villain in this movie, but not revoice Megamind for the Megamind versus the Doom Syndicate film. That's honestly just kind of funny, because even though these movies are both bad, this one is clearly just still somehow 20 times better than Doom Syndicate, so that's honestly funny. Other than that, though, yeah, Despicable Me just kind of went off the rails, and this is clearly the worst one, in my opinion. But at the same time, again, much like the Despicable Me franchise is known for, at least still occasionally can make me laugh, so it's not the worst of the worst bottom of the barrel, but, like, at the same time, it's like, oh man, we're just getting worse and worse with every single sequel, like, but we're still gonna get like 20 more before we die as a society. Oh man. Despicable Me 3 is only a smidge higher than Despicable Me 4, if I'm being honest. Once again, this movie has the weird case where it feels like it was originated as a directed video sequel, or like an episode of a Despicable Me TV show, and then it somehow got lazily slapped together into a film that somehow made $1 billion. I don't understand this. I don't understand the society and the world. Anyway, this is another film that has like three different subplots, three plots going on that don't converge at all until the very end. So let's go from least important to most important. There's the subplot about the minions that leave, that where they leave Gru because he's no longer villainous, but because this movie came out after Minions came out, so they they justified the Minions backstory, so that's why they leave. Even though the backstory justifies they probably should have left during the second one, but whatever, who cares? And the Minions end up leaving, and they break onto the set of some Sing American Got Talent ripoff, where then they get arrested and go to prison, but then they realize they liked Gru, so they escape the prison, and they contribute nothing to the final battle, so I don't know why we spent so long on that subplot. Then we have a subplot where Lucy tries to bond with the girls, and they do all these misadventures, like going to this cheese festival, and then Agnes and Edith go off into the wilderness to try to get a unicorn, but they end up just getting a goat with one horn, which, all right, that joke's kind of funny, I'll admit that. Margot ends up accidentally accepting a marriage proposal from a boy at the cheese festival, and she has to get out of it, but all of that doesn't matter once we get to the ending. All right, can we just talk about the main plot now, please? So basically, the main plot of this thing is we get introduced to Gru's twin brother, Drew, which is basically just Gru, but annoying. Like, I don't know any other way to describe that. And basically, Drew wants to go into the family business, which is villainy. Remember supervillains? Remember that was the whole premise of this franchise? I sure forgot, and so did Illumination. Basically, Drew wants Gru to teach him villainy, and it turns out, it looks like this could be a really fun subplot, kind of maybe making Gru kind of interested in villainy again and learning about it through Drew. And so, but then Gru just decides to use Drew to steal something from the main villain of the film that he stole from the Anti-Villain League earlier in the film. And it just turns out Drew is hilariously incompetent. And then everything comes to heads over heels when the villain just kidnaps the girls, and we have to have the action climax to save them. Yeah, okay. The villain is pretty interesting. He's basically, the whole premise about him is that he was a child star from the 80s, and his whole character is just referencing the TV show he was on as the 80s, which, all right, that's pretty cool. And Trey Parker is doing pretty good as the character. I do like this opening sequence where he commits a heist to bat. Like, that's probably one of the best parts about this whole movie. But other than that, like, this movie is just, like, so boring and just so bad. Like, I don't understand how this film made $1 billion. This one, like, it's not even the best Despicable Me movie. Why did this one make $1 billion? I don't understand. Yeah, this movie is just fine. Like, again, it didn't do anything that insulted me. There were still some fun jokes and some fun bits, but overall, like, at the same time, it feels like they made a sitcom episode with 3 plot lines and then stitched them together at the end just to make them all feel coherent, when literally anything going on that's not Gru and Drew related literally does not matter to the final conflict. So, whatever. I'm going to keep my discussion on migration kind of brief because, like, I pretty much have nothing to say. This is, like, one of the weird cases on this list where it's like, I don't think this movie is good. Like, I don't think it's that good. But at the same time, I can't really pick out distinctively what I disliked. Like, it might just be one of those cases where the film is not for me, so I didn't click with anything going on, and it just led to me being really bored throughout most of the runtime. I will give the film this. It had some interesting concepts about this bird family migrating, which is not the worst concept for a film, but I've already seen Wild Robot, so, I kind of get the premise there. I do really like the performance Elizabeth Banks and Kumail Nanjiani give as the main characters. They're pretty interesting. There was this bird captor guy that was pretty cool, but other than that, this film is just basically the definition of basic streaming kids film. And, not streaming, sorry, this was theatrical release, but it's basically just boring, bland, generic kids movie, and I really don't have anything, like, super negative to say about it, like a crash out, like I've had with, like, all the other films on this list. But I also don't have anything, like, extremely positive to say, so I guess this film kind of just works as, like, a middle-of-the-list kind of film. Like, yeah, like, we're just going to place this here, and we're just going to move on. I really don't have much more to say about migration, to be honest. Despicable Me 2. Wow. Even the first sequel was already still bad, and we went downhill pretty fast after that, but we've already talked about those ones. So basically, Despicable Me 2 kind of is the film that I've always classified as like the turning point of this franchise, where the basic premise is that Gru, as a former villain, gets hired by this anti-villain league to hunt down another more dangerous supervillain, and he gets a partner in the form of Lucy, and it's pretty obvious they're going to fall in love by the end, but I mean, sure, I guess it's kind of believable, and it's not the worst thing I've seen from this franchise, so I'll take it. And that's a pretty funny plot line as you get to see Gru and Lucy kind of working together to track down a villain in this mall, but then they slowly fall for each other. It's pretty interesting at least, but then there's like five other subplots that kind of bog this film down. Because they want to make it look better that Lucy and Gru get together, they have Gru go on this date with this other girl who hates that he's bald, so he wears a wig. But then, in order to stop her from whipping off the wig, Lucy shoots her in the butt with a blow dart, and she goes to sleep. And they have to drive her home on the top of Lucy's car, which is like, what? What? And then there's this other subplot where Margot falls in love with the son of the guy Gru suspects is the villain, and he ends up having like the overprotective father shtick, but then it's revealed that the father was actually the villain. So like, what was the villain? So like, what was the point? And then for some reason, the son also just disappears by the time that happens. Like, what is going on there? Like, huh? That's what we really need for Despicable Me 5. We need the son to come back. Get revenge on Gru. Oh, man. And then there's this other subplot where Dr. Nefario wants to leave Gru to continue being a villain. I guess I understand where they got the plot for the minions in Despicable Me 3. But he leaves and ends up start working for the villain, El Macho, who is actually pretty based. I'll give the movie that. They did actually do pretty good with the villain this time around. And basically the premise is they stole this monster serum, and they, over the film, have slowly been kidnapping the minions and been injecting them with the serum to turn them into monsters. And Dr. Nefario literally has no problem with this until the very end of the film, where El Macho goes, hey, minion, go kill Gru, and hey, I'm gonna kidnap Lucy and hold him for Gru. And then Nefario's all of a sudden like, oh yeah, Gru, I need your help to get out of this. It's like, huh? You literally did not realize this was a bad idea until you saw this happen? Like, are you kidding me, Nefario? And then it leads to a pretty cool action climax. I'll give the film this. I do kind of like that ending fight sequence with all the purple minions and that. That was pretty cool. And also, I do like the ending of actually seeing Gru and Lucy get together and have a pretty cool wedding with some of the characters from the franchise, even though noticeably Gru's mom is absent. So I don't know why that happened. But other than that, it's a pretty fun little film. It definitely is the best of the Despicable Me sequels that are part of the main series, at least. But also, it's still not very good because it's dividing its time between like 15 different subplots, and like 10 of them don't really even matter to the final product. So yeah, it's fine. It's not the worst Illumination film, but we also could have had a whole lot better, if I'm being honest. Okay, Sing is not that bad, guys. I mean, yes, it's generic and kind of boring, where we basically just have all these different characters that are just playing into normal stereotypes, competing in this singing competition, and they're all animals for some reason, because I guess it's a 2000s movie, it's a 2010s movie geared towards a 7-year-old, so of course it has to be animals so that they'll watch it. But basically, it's a pretty fun little movie where we've got a lot of genre bending characters, where we have, of course, the big jerk character in the form of this Seth MacFarlane mouse. We have the stay-at-home mom, the annoying other pig, Scarlett Johansson playing a teenager, and we have the shy girl, and then of course we have Taron Egerton playing Johnny. He doesn't really follow an archetype, if I'm being honest. And of course, they're all held up by Matthew McConaughey playing this koala, who is the one hosting the competition, which is pretty interesting. Yeah, this movie is very interesting when it comes to its characters, and the best parts of this movie, I'll admit, are the beginning, where they're having the auditions and that, because it hasn't hit you yet how generic and played out this film is, and the ending, where there actually are some pretty decent musical performances. Like, I'm not gonna lie, they did pretty good with those musical performances at the end. Like, of course, Taron Egerton doing "I'm Still Standing." Like, Of course, I loved that. Like, if this movie had to exist to get him into Rocket Man, then sure, I'll take it. Also, the Shake It Off song was not that bad either, and I do actually like Scarlett Johansson's character doing her own original song, which was pretty cool. But the second act about this film really kind of drags, as we're instead of the music competition, it's just, hey, let's focus on Scarlett Johansson going through teenage drama, and the Seth MacFarlane mouse gets really unlikable. Matthew McConaughey lies to everybody about how much the price is for the music competition. And we also get to see the struggles of the theater where he can't really pay for the power bill, or he can't really get the money to fund the theater any longer. It's like, can we just get to the musical numbers already? Like, you're really trying my patience, movie. In the end, Sing is not the worst thing Illumination ever did, but it's also not that good. Like, it's definitely one of the better ones, I'll admit, but we're still not to the films I like. Oh man, what are we doing here? The Lorax is one of those movies that's so bad that I can't understand how people like it. On the other side, I love this movie with everything I hold dear. Like, if we're talking critically, this film is probably one of the worst Illumination movies, but I feasibly can't rank it any lower than I have because it's just such an enjoyable movie for me to watch. Like, out of all the Illumination movies in the whole filmography, this is easily Illumination's Cars 2, a movie that's so bad, and I know it's so bad, but yet I enjoy every time I rewatch this movie to the point where I have to rank it above the movies that I physically would not want to rewatch on any whims. The Lorax is just such a bafflingly misguided movie that basically takes almost everything good about the original story in the book and waters it down or strips it of its context to create a story that just genuinely is so much worse than the book. Because the whole premise of this thing is that it's supposed to be a story about environmentalism and it has all these wacky things that go on with it, but it so badly misguides what its premise should be. Instead of embodying the Onceler as this character that got led astray by capitalism and a fact that the Onceler could be anyone, they turn him into this hipster version of himself, played by Ed Helms, and they put the entire blame of everything he did on his neglectful family and specifically his mom, which is like, what was the point of that? Then they also have a side story that the Lorax and all the friends are trying to stop him, but then they don't because they can't, because that's the premise of the book. And then breaking up the story of Ed Helms and the Lorax, you have this story about the kid who wants to learn about the trees, and unlike in the book where it's supposed to be seen as a good gesture they're doing about free will and all that, instead it's just a story about Zac Efron wanting to get a tree for Taylor Swift because he likes her. So, and the movie then decides it's also going to pad out the runtime by breaking up the Onceler story, where every once in a while we have to cut back to Ted going back to the Thneedville or whatever it is to do some boring scenes that are just meant to set up this really bad villain. And the villain is also not a villain that's supposed to represent how a normal person can get led astray by capitalism, because in this world he literally saved everybody by inventing a product because there's no more trees. So yeah, that entire story is misguided. And then the movie decides to end with a really positive pop number, which robs the children of the ambiguous ending in the book, which inspires them to take care of the planet. Yeah, pretty much every bad thing anybody's ever said about this movie is 100% true, and I can't understand. And it's just one of the worst adaptations of a story I've ever seen in my life. But the movie is still pretty decent. Like, I'm sorry. This is just one of those movies that has so many layers to how awful it is, and the fact that it's just an enjoyable movie by seeing just such a fun dynamic between Danny DeVito as the Lorax and Ed Helms as the Onceler, who give some pretty impressive chemistry. And the film also has some pretty catchy musical numbers. Like, I'm pretty sure everybody knows how bad can I be is, and even the other numbers in there are at least catchy. They're not as good as that previously mentioned one, but I mean they're still decent at least. Yeah, I mean, like I said, like this is pretty hands down probably one of the worst Illumination movies critically, but I feasibly cannot rank it lower than I have because of just how enjoyable it is. And if I had the entire Illumination filmography sitting in front of me, this is the film I would pick up to watch before any of the Sings, The Secret Life of Pets, or any of the films I've ranked below it. Because yeah, man, this is just a fun movie. I don't know what you guys want from me. Like, man, this studio is full of so much garbage that at least there's some garbage I can enjoy. Oh man. Minions The Rise of Gru is in no ways a great movie. It's like probably only like a solid 6 out of 10 if we're being honest. But like considering the reputation the original movie gave this sequel, honestly, this movie looks like the Mona Lisa compared to that. Anyway, Minions The Rise of Gru. Yeah, this one's actually pretty decent. Okay, I'm surprised, Illumination. And the funniest thing, the reason why this movie is so much better than the original Minions is because the Minions are back to being side characters again. Because this film centers on the Rise of Gru. And the Rise of Gru stuff, yeah, that's pretty good. I like the whole concept of this film goes where we have Gru trying to be a villain and he like gets mentored by Wild Knuckles, the a very notorious supervillain, and Gru ends up getting trained by him, and it leads to him getting going on an adventure that ends up leading into where he eventually ends up in Despicable Me, which I think is pretty cool. Seeing how he inherited his house, the future car, and all the stuff far in between. We even get Dr. Nefario's origin in there. Like, yeah, this movie's pretty decent when it came to setting up its characters. And the Gru stuff with Wild Knuckles is actually pretty decent, and I'll admit it's pretty cool. Unfortunately, there's like 5 other subplots in the film that are also pretty terrible. Like the whole premise of this movie is that Gru is that Wild Knuckles was a part of this big supervillain team called the Vicious Six, and he stole this like magical stone from them. He stole this magical stone for them, but then they betrayed him. And Gru, during an interview to try and join this supervillain group, steals the stone and Wild Knuckles wants to get it back, so he kidnaps Gru, but he doesn't have the stone because one of the minions gave it up for a pet rock or something. So Gru ends up just teaming up with Wild Knuckles and getting mentored by him, and then the minions have stupid subplots because the 3 main minions from the last movie want to save Gru, even though he's in no imminent danger, so I don't know what the point of that subplot is. So they learn kung fu from this one lady for some reason, and it just exists to pad out the runtime. Then there's this other minion who was the one who sold the stone, who has to try to get it back and goes on this road trip with this biker gang or something. Yeah, that's not very great. Yeah, basically everything Minions related in Minions: The Rise of Gru is terrible, and also the Vicious Six don't fare much better because all they really exist to do is to betray Wild Knuckles in the opening scene to basically go after Gru when he steals the stone the first time, and then also then they just are gone from the movie until the finale where they get the stone back and they use it to turn themselves into animals for some reason. What was the point of that? They also turn the minions into animals here for some reason, which I don't understand that. Like, wait a minute, I've seen these animals before. These are just the animals from Miraculous Ladybug. You can't fool me. Anyway, Minions The Rise of Gru has some definitely good elements. I do, like mentioned, the Rise of Gru stuff is pretty good, and there are some jokes that got me laughing. I like the bit when it implies that the Minions caused 9/11, but other than that, yeah, there's not much else here. This is just a pretty boring prequel spinoff that is just all right in the long run. It's not really bad like the first film, but it also is nowhere near as good as some of the other films we have coming up. So I guess this is where I gotta rank it. So yeah, it's a fine movie, but it's not really doing anything special. Sorry. The Super Mario Bros. Movie. Oh man, this is such a great movie. It's one of the best movies I've ever seen in my entire life, and it's still only like a 6 out of 10, man. Yeah, this movie is actually pretty decent when you consider it as a fun little Mario adventure that, in a way, kind of is very weird to me personally because the film tries to have this whole grounded in reality personality where Mario and Luigi live in Brooklyn, and then they get sucked into the Mushroom Kingdom, and that's the catalyst for the story because they get separated and Luigi gets captured by Bowser and Mario has to go on a big adventure to save him, which I like kind of that idea. I like that they didn't just do the classic Mario thing of, oh, we got to kidnap Peach and get her back. But at the same time, I really like Luigi more than Mario, so him being basically absent from the entire movie kind of frustrates me personally on a deep level. Yeah, this movie is pretty decent in some cases. Yeah, I mean, if you're a fan of Mario like I am, I imagine you'll get a lot out of this movie because there is a lot of really fun references to the games from really cool obstacle courses that look like levels from Mario. The power-ups are included that are pretty cool. You get to see so many fun characters, and overall the voice actors are also doing a pretty good job at embodying these characters except Chris Pratt. He's like the only one that feels off in this entire movie. But other than that, like everybody else sounds pretty good to the point where if you didn't tell me who the celebrities were, I probably couldn't pick them out. Except Jack Black is Bowser, but like he fits the voice of Bowser, so I'm gonna let it slide. Yeah, Bowser's pretty cool in this one. I like the whole route they went with him, and it's pretty cool. The only thing, my only real main issue that I've always had with this movie is the fact that the pacing, like I've mentioned this in a previous video that you can go check out, but the only real things in this movie that I dare to rewatch, like I'm not gonna lie, since I saw this movie the first time, I've rarely gone back and rewatched the entire movie. The only things I've rewatched is the Rainbow Road sequence that happens about midway through, the fight with Donkey Kong, who is a pretty epic character. Thank you, Seth Rogen, and it's pretty cool. And that ending fight where you see Mario and Luigi going up against Bowser. Apart from those three scenes, I pretty much just skip the rest of the movie. Like, this movie's pacing is so slow, and nothing really happens in between those segments to the point where I just got extremely bored. I'm not gonna lie that this isn't a good movie because it is, but like but comparing it to the rest of the Illumination filmography, this is still a pretty solid movie. Like I can't believe a 6 out of 10 garners that, but it's just a fun film. And if you're going into it not expecting the next greatest film of all time, then you'll probably have a good time with it. But at the end of the day, it's not great, but and it has those couple issues that kind of prevent me from putting it in higher because like if we're being honest, if I'm only gonna ever rewatch three scenes of your movie, then it probably does not get to rank high. But when you're going up against a studio like Illumination, somehow three scenes are enough to elevate you above like 90% of what we've already talked about. So great, yay! Why did I think this video was a good idea? I'm in torture. Just make it stop. I'm not going to dwell too long on the Super Mario Galaxy movie because I have already made a full dedicated review for this film where I exhausted most of my thoughts, and I made that video with my buddy Chris that you can check out on our channels if you so desire. But this movie, in my opinion, is pretty much on the same level as the first movie, where it has a lot of really epic moments that are pretty cool, as the action sequences and all that are pretty fun. But at the same time, the movie is pretty much not there story-wise, which I can at least admit that the first movie has a decently tight-knit story. And other than that, the rest of this film just feels like it's like if you put the two movies side by side, the first movie has the story, but this movie has the better action, hype moments, and characters, if I'm being honest. And yeah, Justice for Rosalina, and I wish Yoshi either wasn't here or got more to do. And other than that, like I mentioned, these movies are pretty much the exact same, but I like that this movie has faster pacing. So if I'm being honest, the two Mario movies are probably like tied for these two spots, if I'm being honest. But like I put Mario Galaxy like a smidge over the first film because if I had both them sitting next to me, I might sooner rewatch this one because it actually has more that I feel like I would want to rewatch instead of the first film. So that's why I guess rank above it. But if you want to know my extended thoughts on the film, then go check out my original review because we still got two more films to get through and they're the good ones. So I actually want to spend a lot of time talking about them. So yeah, Mario Galaxy movie's fine. It's good, but at the same time, it's still only like a 6 out of 10 film. Guys, I can't believe it, but Sing 2 is actually a good movie and one of the best Illumination movies. It's still only like a 7 out of 10 though, which is actually kind of shocking again. Sing 2 is actually a movie that I'm shocked that I enjoyed as much as I did, as they really went all out in this movie and actually tried to make this sequel really good compared to the first one, as the first film really hinders itself on all of the archetypes that all these characters fit into, and they didn't really waver too much from them. But this time around, they actually gave the characters kind of nuanced plot lines, which I thought was pretty interesting. Like, they have this whole subplot where, well, I guess I should explain. The premise of this movie is that all the animals go to the big city and they want to put on a big Broadway level show. And basically, it's all of them trying to get through various plot lines about that, where we have Johnny is basically not great at dancing, so he has to get dance lessons, but he doesn't do great, and his dance instructor is kind of not a nice guy, so he gets training from this street dancer who's a pretty cool character. They have a plot line where the pig from the previous movie has a fear of heights, and there's a scene where she has to jump off a high place with a bungee rope, so she has to get over her fear. The elephant has a crush that she navigates that's pretty interesting. And overall, there's some pretty good, and there's even a very good plot line about, we have Bono in this movie, and he basically has decided not to play music anymore after the loss of his wife. But then we have the Scarlett Johansson character from the previous movie decides to be a more grounded person in this movie and help Bono through his grief and get him to come back to do the show, which is a pretty interesting plot line. There's also this fun plot line where the big producer of this show forces Matthew McConaughey to put his daughter in the show, but his daughter can't act to save her life. So she's not great. But then eventually she betrays her father to help the group put on the show in a different role that she is more suited for. The villain also, this producer guy, is actually a pretty good antagonist, I'll admit. He does have some great moments. And even at the end of this movie, the musical numbers at the end of this movie are actually really good. Like, I'm shocked. There is not a bad one in this whole group, and that's not really something I can say about the first movie, which has definitely some stinkers in that final performance sequence. Honestly, Sing 2 is a pretty decent movie if I'm being considered. Why is it still just a 7 out of 10, you might ask? Well, this movie's pacing really drags in the second act. Yeah, this movie kind of suffered from that classic problem of that the beginning is pretty good with some pretty good opening musical numbers and that. And like I mentioned, the ending is great. And while, yes, I like some of that stuff in the middle portion of this movie just drags for a long time in the middle. And it really just becomes a moment where after a while, you really just want to see them get to the final performance already. And it just doesn't do anything great. This movie, if it wasn't for that slow pacing in the second act, this probably could have topped the number 1 film, but it unfortunately has to take number 2, which I don't think is bad by any means, but at the same time, I think it could have been better. But hey, the fact that a 7 out of 10 is a massive W for Illumination should just tell you a lot of things. Yeah, Sing 2 is pretty good, and if you're looking for a good Illumination movie, this is definitely one of the ones you should check out. And honestly, one of the best parts is you kind of can jump into it without even seeing Sing 1, because they pretty much explain everything you need to know about the first movie, and they killed off Seth MacFarlane, who was the most annoying character in the first film, so yay! Guys, let's be honest here. You knew what number 1 was going to be before you even clicked on the video. Despicable Me is universally regarded as the only good Illumination movie, and it's also coincidentally their first movie. I can't believe they peaked with the first movie. Literally every other studio I've reviewed has literally their first movie somewhere in the middle or somewhere in the top. Like, I can't even believe it. And like I mentioned in the intro, even though Despicable Me is the best Illumination movie, it's still only like an 8 out of 10 and probably like a C tier DreamWorks or Disney film if I was to rank it amongst those studios. Hallelujah. Anyway, Despicable Me, it's actually pretty decent. Like, I'm not gonna lie, it actually is a movie that feels not like an Illumination movie because, like, the plot actually happens. There's not a bunch of BS scenes that fill out the runtime just to get us from point A to point B. The comedy is actually good, and gets me laughing. The minions are perfectly passable in this film because they are side characters, as God intended. And Gru himself is actually very good. I love Steve Carell's voice that he does for the character, and he delivers some pretty funny jokes throughout the movie. I love the relationship he starts to build with the girls. I think they're very fun characters, and I do really like some of the scenes they spend together. Dr. Nefario is a fun sidekick character. And of course, this movie features Vector, one of the greatest animated villains I've ever seen. Because, like, he's not, like, nefarious or great in any sense of those words, but he's just so entertaining. And honestly, the fact that he's so incompetent makes him so fun to watch. And honestly, I quote moments from this guy like all the time because it's just Vector. Like, how can you not start laughing the second you see this funny man? Overall, surprisingly, Despicable Me is still a pretty decent movie, and it is still the best Illumination movie. And that's honestly kind of sad that they made their best film, and funnily enough, they went straight from their best film straight to their worst. So yeah, congratulations, Illumination. So there you guys have it. My ranking of all 16 Illumination movies. Yeah, as you probably could garner from the ranking, most of these films are pretty trash, and I don't really like most of, or if any of them. Yeah, this definitely is the weakest of the main major animated studios that I've covered so far on the channel, but at the same time, it's a studio that I guess I'm not super against. Like, there are definitely other studios out there that are kind of bad, but like mainstream wise, Illumination is pretty bad because it seems that they're just incapable of creating art because they're just bad. However, it does seem like maybe there's a bright future ahead of us for Illumination because with movies like the Super Mario Galaxy movie and Sing 2, it kind of makes me believe that maybe Illumination is starting to get better at storytelling and delivering good movies. Or maybe it's just the fact that they're making mid movies now and that majors gives them a massive edge over their previous works. But at the same time, I guess I'm not super angry at the studio because if I'm gonna be honest, I'm gonna forget like 90% of these films by next week after I finish this video because like let's be honest, like there's no reason for me to think about a lot of these movies again until like 5 years down the road where I'm probably gonna do this ranking again after there's like 20 more Despicable Me movies and 5 more Mario movies. But at the end of the day, this is definitely a studio that exists and it definitely gave us some good films and a lot of trash. So, you know what? I'm just going to have to take it for what it is. So, thank you guys all very much for watching this video and I want to know what is your ranking of all 16 Illumination movies? And if that's a little too difficult, just tell me why Despicable Me is the best one and then what your ranking for maybe the worst one is. Because if that's too difficult. But without further ado, thank you guys all very much for watching this video, and I hope to see you guys all in the next one. Bye, guys!